Okay, I welcome you to another episode of Learning Stories. This is an audio and video podcast where we interview a diverse set of learners from the 21st century. On each episode of this show, we interview a guest who has a story to share about how they acquired a set of skills and knowledge in a creative and innovative manner. In the process, we hope to uncover a new understanding of learning as conceptualized and imagined by the guest on our show. Today's guest is Shruti. A little bit about Shruti before we jump into this conversation. So, Shruti is a documentary filmmaker, community builder, and baker. She's the founder and parent of Third Base Bakery, Cubbon Reads, Bookmark App, and Pint of You Club. I'm amazed how she's able to do so many things at the same time, but we'll find out today. But Shruti, the first question I wanted to ask you, you're involved in so many different projects, but I'd love to know what Shruti was like growing up. Where did you grow up, and what were you like as a student at school?
I have grown up in Allahabad, so all my schooling has happened there, which is until the age of 16. And I was quite a rebel kid at home. I mean, I would fight with my parents a lot about a lot of things that I wanted, even for my bookshelf and, for my clothes and things like that. Uh, so I was indulged sometimes, but mostly not. And I think that also made me curious about wanting to get some of these things externally and on by my own self, that is. So I was quite involved with a lot of artsy things, like I would make a lot of paintings, but very childlike at home. I was also a learner of Bharatnatyam dance, and I mean it's both with me, my sister and me. I have a younger sister, so both of us were equally involved in some of these activities. We also were very interested in making our birthday parties very fun and thematic and all of that. And I think something that we picked on from our mom only, actually, because my mom, she's also a very creative person when it comes to arts and crafts. And growing up, I mean, until a certain age, like I think pretty much about the age till we were 10, she used to organize those birthday parties, calling our friends and the parents of those friends, and they would always be around, let's say, the Three Bears or the Goldilocks or Archies, and themes like those, or whatever was trending at that point of time. And she would, like today, I think there are a lot of options for you to go out and just buy something very nice looking and creative and artsy for return gifts and things. But she would back then make everything from hand by herself from scratch, getting thermocol and chart paper and a lot of painting and all that equipment. So I think we really took interest there. And I also, I mean, I remember having very fond memories of, for example, organizing this Halloween themed birthday party for my younger sister's birthday. And I mean, it was kind of like me dumping my own thoughts and wishful thinking onto my sister's birthday. And I mean, we studied in a convent school, both my sister and I. So I think, I mean, and of course, like I come from like a largely speaking Hindu family. So it was very interesting because when my parents would want to recite a Hindu prayer, I would be the one reciting some, hymn that we've learned in school, just as a form of rebellion. So, those silly things would happen. But I think one very important, and now that I can say as a learning, is also about how I got into baking, because that's something that again my mom has been just doing it ever since I've, come to life. And I've seen her bake so many types of cakes at home. She also used to have cooking classes at home for, again, kids our age, like early teens or even toddlers. So, like, no gas sort of cooking classes. So, mostly to do with microwave oven and things that kids can enjoy doing with their friends or even their parents. So, I really took on to that because, and I think it's a legacy passed through in our generation also. So my nani started, and I mean before that, her own mom. So my par nani, my mom, and then to me. So I think baking as a concept, cakes specifically, has been a passed on gift like that in our legacy. And like you mentioned about my home bakery, I mean, so far I've only been experimenting with baking at home for myself and for friends. But in the last 2 years, I really thought about how I can also share this with people outside my home, and launching like a very small home bakery with my little oven at home is something that I took interest in, because it's a way for me to also share the concept of how I enjoy cakes with the external world. And not to say that, uh, I mean, it's a very humble setup, so to say. It's very small, and it was just a lot more exciting and about me sharing something with people about how I enjoy cakes, because I don't like cakes with, cream and ganache and all of that too much. I like to keep them more natural things, like cakes that you can enjoy on, let's say, a daily basis, because of their flavors. They're not too big on fats or sugars. They're just a delicacy that can still be enjoyed on a daily basis. So uh, I think, yeah, that's where my interest in baking started. And I do have some grand plans, a lot of visual thinking there also. Um, and yeah, and then after I moved out from Allahabad, which is when I wrapped up schooling, I I was kind of good with books and reading and writing, and I just presumed that I would be good with English literature, for my graduation. So I had no clarity, honestly, about what I wanted to do. But because I was good with reading books and fiction and things like that, so I thought, let me just go ahead with a degree in literature. And
Hmm.
that's how Delhi University happened, because it was not too far away from Allahabad, just an overnight train ride. Um, it was a cutthroat uh, competition, obviously. Like, we all know about how Delhi University functions. But because I think I came from an ICSE background, I was able to, crack one examination that they had launched, I think, in the same year that I was seeking admissions there. It was
Hmm.
called CATE. It was a common admission program, a test for English honors. And I managed to score pretty decently there. So I think that's how I was able to get an admission into DU. Otherwise, it would not have happened solely depending on my board results. And 3 years there was life changing in Delhi, because it was also my first taste of freedom. I was getting to know people from a very different perspective. I mean, the kind of people I would meet there was not how I had seen people in Allahabad. And I think it also exposed me to a lot of different cultures. I have always studied in an all girls school. The college I happened to go to was an all women's college.
Hmm.
But DU being DU, there was always access to, boys around. And especially in the South campus, there was like IIT Delhi, which was just 15 minutes auto ride away. So, out of curiosity, I mean, my friends and I would also visit IIT on occasions, during festivals and all that. So, that way, like, I had my first exposure to, meeting boys as peers for the first time. Uh, it just sounds a little retarded, I think, right now, but that's just how it was. And
Yeah.
it's after that, I mean, whatever, I studied English there, and had like brilliant 3 years, very life transforming 3 years in Delhi. And then, I mean, fared, I think, decently well through the examinations there. I think going to Christ in Bangalore for my post graduation was even more. I would say it challenged me in a way about how culturally I was seeing things, because
Hmm.
suddenly I was living in Bangalore, and I had bits of knowledge about how Bangalore would be, because my mom has also grown up in Bangalore, like her entire childhood was in Bangalore. So I have heard those stories about Bangalore. But um, when I came to Christ, because there are a lot of people who are international students and a lot of people from South India also, and some from North, but largely from the South. So I think I really enjoyed the way that different kinds of communities could come together in the same classroom, and that's what really got me excited about looking at Bangalore from a long term perspective. And anywhere in South India for that matter, I think. I happened to study Masters in Media Studies in
Mm.
Christ for my post graduation. And for the first time in my life, this was a course that was very assignment driven. It was very practical assignments driven rather than only theory. And a lot of group work and a lot of, filmmaking and things like that were part of our course. So I think I really enjoyed the course, despite all the restrictions that we've all heard the college imposing on the students. But I
Mm.
think I really enjoyed then. And I mean, yeah, I was lucky in some capacity, if you can, uh, I mean, if you would like to call that, but like I was able to get a campus placement. So whatever, I worked in PR and I worked in branding and then marketing and communications across 3 jobs. And that was, I mean, my corporate life was for about 8.5 years.
Wow.
And then only last year, I think June is when I decided that I think I need a break of sorts, because I've never taken a long-term break, even between 2 jobs. Like
Yeah.
it's always been a week or 2 weeks max. So this time I thought that I just want a break, and I'll see how things go. But then I took a break, and somehow I've not felt the need to look back at picking another corporate job,
Mm.
thankfully. Uh, I mean, there were very lean periods where I was also wondering what the hell is going to happen with my finances. Like I'm not making any money and all that.
Mm.
Uh, up until I think a few months ago, in fact. So, but otherwise, it was a very inspiring time for me, because I also found myself getting into things which I never had thought about earlier. In the same measure, for example, the documentary filmmaking that you referred to only started in the past 1 year, because I came across this mentorship program that documentary filmmakers started, and they're all national awardees and very well recognized in the domain. So I signed up for Docustan, and that's how my journey with documentary filmmaking started. And I'm still figuring the whole process out, because I'm a newbie to camera handling. I'm not new to storytelling, but through visual format, I am, I think. So, yeah, so, and then all the communities that you referred to also have started in the last 2, 3 years. Uh, I think, yeah, that's about me quite a bit.
You did such a great job, telling me like 20 plus years of life experience in
Yeah,
like a monologue. But I think that was so interesting, Shruti, and I have so much I want to unpack there. Like, firstly, growing up in Allahabad, like, what was your what are your current memories of the influence of your parents on your outlook, and what was it like growing up in a city like Allahabad? Like, I'm assuming it's a little different from like the larger metros like Bangalore,
yeah.
Delhi, or Mumbai. So can you tell me a little bit about those two pieces?
Sure. So I think I mean, I would start with my grandfather actually. So, so unfortunately, I didn't have the chance to meet my grandmom, because she passed away when my mom was still pregnant with me, during the same time. But I was very lucky to have the company of my grandfather through most of the years that I was growing, like for at least for 20 years of my life. And he was a uh, again, a very inspiring person, I think, for me personally, because it was through him that I also picked up very basic, things like how to present yourself on a dining table, those table manners and etiquettes, how to pour tea and how to make tea firstly, and then how to pour tea and how to sip tea and things like that. Um, I also, I think, got an understanding of what taste means through him in some capacity, because I mean, he had this collection of perfumes that I was exposed to through him, like some really good brands from across the world, because he would travel for work across the world. He used to collect a lot of currency coins and notes again from his travels, and keep them displayed, whatever, like in front of me, like he would come and show me. He was also like, when it comes to linens and the way he dressed and all of that, was very like, he was called the Devanand of his times. When he was growing up in college, he studied at BHU. So I think I developed my taste from back then. And even in terms of artwork, I think there was a lot of artwork that my grandmom or even my aunts had made even before my mom had got married. So some of that was at my home. And I think that's what has defined the way that I think I still look at art, and how I have developed my taste as an adult. I think there has been a huge influence from there, from my grandfather. Also, I mean, very again, very fun, silly snippet here, but uh, my grandfather, when he was living in Allahabad, I mean, after whatever his world travels, there was a time that he was living in Allahabad also. So he was working at a factory which is in Naini. So Naini is like another town near Allahabad, which is just a boat ride away from Allahabad across the Ganges. Or, of course, there is a bridge also, but it's more fun when you go over the river via a boat than your car. So, whatever. So, he would spend his weeks there, like his weekdays there, and then he would come home to Allahabad on the weekends. So every weekend he would get me and my sister a whole bag of, those Alpenliebe toffees or eclair toffees, or, those miniature toffees, but the whole packet. And I think I wanted to make money even as a 6 year old. So what I would do is that I would open those packets of toffees, and then I would sell the toffees to my own parents for every penny that they would give me, and including chocolates sometimes that my grandfather would get. So I think, and I would also maintain a ledger of sorts, that this was my stock, this is the money I got, this is the money I spent from my piggy bank then. So all of that, I don't know where I picked this up from, but this happened right when I was 6, 7 also, from then on. So uh, yeah, that. And then I think yeah, I do miss my grandfather now. I sometimes happen to think about him. uh, it's been quite some time since we all have lost him. But I think after, I mean, so actually, what also was the case that my grandfather would also rescue me from my parents. Sometimes when like my parents were like after me, and especially around examination days and things like that. So like he would come and tell my mom, for example, why are you scolding her so much? Let her have fun, things like that. And not like in a rude way or whatever, but he would try and come rescue me, pacifying her of sorts, like that. So, I mean, it was a fun childhood that way.
How sweet.
Uh, yeah, and yeah, I mean, I did mention about my mom, about how a lot of my culinary skills and baking and artsy things I have picked from her. From my father, I think it's been a more adventurous side of things. For example, he would be the one making a lot of plans. Like we used to travel around as a family quite a bit
Okay.
when we were growing up, like to, I mean, mostly within India, but like to north, east, south also. I've done a couple of trips with my parents, and across in Himachal quite a bit. So yeah, I think that's where my interest in the way I travel has also developed, because back then we would travel to all these places and we wouldn't stay in like typical hotels. We would stay at either guest houses or resort rooms that offer a kitchen sort of a space. And we
Mm.
used to all like come together, the four of us, like my sister, me, my parents, four of us would come together to, just enjoy a breakfast at home before we stepped out somewhere.
Mm.
So, that sort of a setup makes it feels like you're traveling for a longer time. You have a like a basic home sort of a setup, and then you go out and explore the outdoors. So I think I have carried that within me, because back then there was no options for Airbnbs. But
Yeah.
now that we have Airbnbs, I would totally go for a nice Airbnb over any hotel. Like I don't fancy living in Taj and ITCs. I find them quite commercial and picket fenced or sort of situations when you're traveling. So I
Mm.
think that's been a huge influence on me from my dad about how I'd like to travel. And otherwise, I think he can be quite lazy when it comes to certain things. So I think that's also become ingrained in me a little bit. Like, I like to take my time and do things. I'm never in a hurry. So I think those have been some of my influences, and it's coming from a family, that is.
Right.
Um, and yeah, and I think I've made some really great friends again while growing up in Allahabad, who I continue to be very tight with, I think, which is a rarity even in today's times, despite social media and all that. So, for example, uh, I have this friend, her name is Prakriti, and lucky for me, she also lives in Bangalore now. And I've known her all my life. Like, I'm 33. I've known her for 33 years of my life. In fact, even before that, because our parents were also friends. We are next door neighbors in Allahabad. And yeah, so she, again, I mean, I've known her. I've known another friend of mine. Her name is Anshika. She lives in Delhi now. And again, she and I, we became friends because her mom and my mom have been friends. So, I mean, those kind of friendships have lasted me for all my life. And I think Allahabad has to be merited for that because of just how small a town it is. So, or
Mm.
at least used to be when I was growing up. I don't think that's the case anymore. But when I was growing up, it was still pretty much a very small town. I mean, pretty much everyone knew each other, sort of a thing, and at least in pockets of Allahabad. Now it's become a very wide, far off city. Also, like there are areas that, I mean, you will need maybe 25, 30 minutes to reach from one end to the other. But
Mm.
I mean, even 30 minutes is like incomparable for a city like Bangalore, Bombay.
Right.
So, but I mean, that's Allahabad for us all. And it was much smaller, like back then. Like 10 minutes, you will be out of the city, like it was like that.
Mm.
So, I think Allahabad for me was mostly about, these friends of mine, and maybe going for Bharatnatyam classes with them, or some summer vacation art classes with them. I studied in a convent school, so there were some friends who, of course, lasted me through my entire schooling time. Then some friends who also moved out of St. Mary's Convent, which is where I studied, because they moved to other cities or to other schools to pursue education differently. Uh, but yeah, I mean, it was mostly about, I think, a lot of home time, a lot of home learnings from my parents and my friends' parents, and I think that's just how we grew up. Like, we spent a lot of time at each other's homes. We were very, home fed. Like, we didn't have Swiggy, Zomato back then, of course, like most of us, right? So the number of restaurants also in Allahabad were very few. So
Mm.
whenever we would go out, it would be for an occasional celebration, not for, like how we are so used to eating out nowadays. It was not like that. Um, I was also, um, I think, I mean, I've never been a Barbie doll person or a car racing person, but I think I always took keen interest in those kitchen sets and, those clay made kitchen utensils and sets that used to come. So I used to really enjoy playing with them, I remember. I was again not a very sporty person, but I used to love bicycling around, and again, not in this whole city because that was not allowed for us. So
Okay.
just in the vicinity of my house, like we would go around, and again with a couple of my friends on our bicycles, we would, keep running around and all that. So that was there. I have some really fond memories of how my summer vacations were spent because Allahabad back then had terrible electricity problems. I mean, we would have random power cuts for 10 hours, 11 hours, 12 hours. I mean, things like that. So, of course, the inverter came in some years. Then there was a generator also that we had to get installed. So all of that, we had that as a backup. But even then, I mean, the summer heat in Allahabad it's just terrible, with the loo that happens. So I think, I mean, the way that our house was designed was that there was this huge cooler, वो खस वाला cooler होता है ना जो,
Hmm.
so that used to cool through the whole house, and that's how we spent a lot of our summer in our whatever cotton frocks and dresses, and a lot of dahi in our meals, and buttermilk, and bel ka sharbat, and whatever mango juice, aam panna, all of that. So very typical North Indian summer sort of a upbringing. And uh, when our cousins used to come down from Delhi and Bombay, cousins as in my buas and their kids and all would come down for a month or so, right? Like it would be a grand celebration of sorts every time. So I mean, those are the kind of memories I've grown up with in Allahabad because it was very homebound of sorts, and I would barely go. I mean, we didn't go really anywhere outside of our home and school and our friends' homes. There was no place to go otherwise, too. So yeah,
You had so
I think I've
many, like,
been speaking for too long.
no, no, you're not at all, Shruti. I mean, there's so many stories from your. I mean, after hearing you, it makes me nostalgic about maybe missing out on living in such a nice small city, and also the parts about staying in touch with your childhood friends. I think that's so rare today. Not a lot of people are able to do that. We have so many parasocial relationships on the internet, but the real bonds that you develop in that early innocent childhood phase, I feel like I'm so glad that you were able to sustain that and still nurture that even today. And that story you said about maintaining that ledger and giving out those toffee candies,
Yeah.
I feel like it's so interesting that now you are starting a bakery and moving into that entrepreneurial sort of path. And
Mm.
I wonder if the seeds of that sort of set in those early interactions. But a lot of people have this curiosity about life at DU, Shriti, and you spent like 3 years studying literature in that
Mm.
college. I'm curious, like, for someone that is really interested about this experience, the DU experience, like if you could tell me 4 or 5 things that defined or shaped your DU experience, and why English literature? Like, what was it about literature that sort of I mean, instead of answering that, maybe you could tell me about 3 or 4 books that you read during that time that maybe rewired your thinking about, the world or human beings in general. So the DU experience and, your connection to literature at that time, I'd love to unpack that as well.
Uh, okay, let me start with how I think culturally it was. I'll start with the cultural immersion first, I think, and then
Right.
get into the syllabus. So I mean, for me, DU was like this. I mean, in fact, going to Delhi suddenly. I mean, because I've spent all my schooling life until then in Allahabad.
Hmm.
And Allahabad and Delhi are very different cities, even though it's just a train ride away, an overnight train ride away, but it's very different. Um, Delhi was this major city with like metro and wide roads and all these glitzy malls and boys, suddenly for me, I mean, they all look very different. They talk very differently. And I mean, in retrospect, not everything was as glamorous as it then looked to be then. Uh, I think that way it was a very interesting time for me because that's, I think, also where I kind of discovered a lot of aspects about myself because until then I was homebound, mostly fed by my parents and things like that, right? So I was doing everything by my own, and I was also learning. I mean, it was a course that I had opted for. Nobody had asked me, nobody told me to go for literature. No one tells you to go study literature. So it was of my own accord. In fact, my parents had also tried to, get me to study CLAT and give CLAT and things like that. But, as soon as I saw the syllabus. I'm like, what the hell? Like, this is never this is not my domain. It doesn't sound even an ounce of an interesting to me. I didn't, thankfully, do any of that, and I had the option to select a course of my own choosing, and that's how I mean, DU and English literature happened for me. And I mean, I also have made some great friends there. Some have continued to be, fortunately, some have also fallen through. But that's okay. I think it's just part of how human lives evolve and friendships evolve. I think for me, going to Delhi was living, like starting to become that adult sort of a thing. So I was suddenly uh, part of stories or listening to stories of how, adults live in a new city where they have come, because I was also living in a paying guest house where there were a lot of people who were also coming from other smaller towns and who I was living with very close to my college on Siri Fort Road, in fact. So I think I I mean the kind of stories that I would hear about how friendships evolve, or how people talk about you or with you. I think it's like verses with you and about you. So that and just I think that all of that kind of exposed and gave me a reality check for also how adult life is or can be. Um, I am not sure if my experience at DU really opened my mind about how I should look at my career, because
Hmm.
again, English literature as a course doesn't really offer you guaranteed path that you can pursue. I mean, of course, the usual suspects there are journalism and media, or further academics, or psychology, or things like that. So, something in social sciences, but also not exactly what it should be, right? So, I think more than what I studied for building a career, then it was the time that I spent there was more about how I discovered myself, how I can be with people, how I am with friends, like how I am making friends. What is it that I like about people, or what do people like about me? So I think that was my learning, largely speaking. I was very involved in extracurricular activities there because it was again mandated in our college. Like we had to, for example, go there was something called NSS, so it stands for National Service Scheme, and we had to be part of something that is uh, like where you are serving the society in a way.
Yeah.
And there were certain hours that we had to log for the time that we spent there, and only then were we graduated to the next year. That was mandatory as part of our course. So I in fact volunteered with an NGO that focuses on environment. It's called Swecha. And it was basically we were asked to put up street plays around environment and garbage disposal and things like that. So we would compose the street play. We would participate in it. We would act, and of course, we were a whole group of 10 to 12 people. And then we would go to various colleges in Delhi University. We would go to various market areas in Delhi, and we would perform the street play there. So I think all of this was very new to me because I had not done anything like that. I also had volunteered at the World Book Fair, as I think they need volunteers to get people around because it's a huge trade fair that happens. So I had volunteered there, and we had also got some compensation for a time that we spent there. So it was, I mean, after my chocolate selling at home, this was my first official internship of sorts, you can say.
Hmm.
So I think, yeah, so it really exposed me to how the world lives, how differently people can be from one another. Um, what people like and what trends mean, for example, why a certain topic needs to be spoken about in some places.
Hmm.
So it kind of gave me an experience into, I think it kind of gave me an experience into what marketing means, or how how things can be how things can be made to look more important. I think also what emotional influences mean, because I mean it was a time when I think we were also uh, a lot of us were also discovering relationships for the first time.
Yeah.
And there were a lot of heartbreaks and all, right? So I think that's what I remember about my time at DU and Delhi largely. And of course, speaking about the syllabus, I mean, literature, the course was designed in a way to also expose us to literature from around the world and not just British literature. So
Hmm.
I studied some Greek literature, which I think uh, I wouldn't have otherwise studied. I would never have thought about picking up a Greek fiction book, and things like Hercules and Lysistrata, and they're very heavy uh, with how gods are uh, anthropomorphized, and a lot of I think how literature can also be erotic, for example. That was my learning from then. Also, I think there were some books that I did read, and they had a very interesting sort of an impact on me. And not to say that they changed my life or whatever, but they gave me a perspective again, I think, into how families or uh, friendships can evolve and things like that. So for example, um, there was Frankenstein that I had studied, and I mean, a lot of us would know about Frankenstein and how the book was written, why it was written, and to because I had not studied a book like Frankenstein up until my school days. But I was also reading The Home and the World, which is a text written by Tagore, and I was also reading Amitav Ghosh. There was also some plays that we were reading. So I think the kind of literature that I was reading was very, very varied. How to I think I didn't struggle so much about how to interpret a lot of text, because we had great professors, and also that sort of a critical thinking was also instilled in us from our schooling days in
Hmm.
ICSE, right? So ICSE textbooks tend to get very heavy in comparison to CBSE, is what I'm told.
Yeah.
So the way that the syllabus there is designed is also that we study the original Shakespearean text, or we study the original plays, and there are no abridged versions. So I was able to understand the language and think from that perspective, like a critical reader of a work of art and all that. So uh, yeah, I think what I would attribute my Delhi days to mostly is about how culturally and emotionally I was growing up,
Hmm.
um, more than the syllabus, I think.
I love that, Shruti. And I think, that idea of like a lot of people today wonder how people can develop this inclination to reading, and I don't feel like it's something you can develop overnight or through a course. It's something that you have to do for a really long period of time. And I think for you, you can see that, whether it was your home upbringing, whether it was, your time in the ICSE or those years at DU. I mean, the fact that you were exposed to so much literature at that point of time gave you a very strong foundation in terms of reading as something you really identify with as a core part of your identity. And I don't know if Cubbon Reads and that idea, which is now like this global movement, some seeds of that also came up in those little interactions you had there. And I'd love to talk about that in a bit, but I want to know a little bit about that time in the middle, this 8-year corporate period in Bengaluru, Shruti. Like, what was corporate life like for you? And did you, because I was just looking at your profile and you've done a bunch of different jobs. You were at a journalism magazine called Tehelka, at Edelman, at Little Black Book, which is a bunch of different organizations doing different things. So at that point, did you know what direction your career wanted to go into? Like, you thought it was journalism, branding? Like, what was that corporate time in your life like? And like,
Uh,
whatever you remember of it again.
I mean, one thing I knew for sure is that I get bored very easily, actually.
Hmm.
So I knew that I can't jump between two jobs that have the same approach. So I
Okay.
never, for example, Tehelka was an internship. It was a 2-month internship. And unfortunately or fortunately, at the same time that the magazine had the whole scenario with
Yeah.
Tarun Tejpal, right? So
Yeah.
it was part of my, I mean, this internship was part of my course during my master's. which I studied at Christ. And I mean, when I came back with my internship certificate for my Viva, and we all had to do a presentation of what we did during our internship. After I did all of that, the professor in the panel, one of them, she asked me, "Oh, did you get to see Tarun Tejpal?" Like,
Hmm.
I don't know how to answer this. Uh, so that was there, but I think. I knew for a fact that I can't, for example, jump from my PR job at Edelman to another PR job at
Hmm.
another PR agency. That was not my kind of thing.
Yeah.
And I think I was very lucky to have found an opportunity at LBB also, because both were very different jobs, very different environments, very different people to work with. So Edelman is one of the, I think, the bigger agencies for public relations in the whole world. And that job was in Gurgaon, in fact. So I was in Gurgaon for about 3.5 years then.
Okay.
Um, and it was, I mean, it laid the foundations for how I would become, as a professional later on. It taught me, I mean, that my time there with my managers, they taught me how to even write professional emails, for example. I'm sure they knew they were signing up for something as basic as this, because obviously they chose to hire me. Um, but it was very interesting again, because I was suddenly working with TCS, and I was traveling to Bombay for the quarter results every time. So like I've seen uh, Mr. Chandrasekharan just like this, like
Wow.
my as my client, and I've not had an occasion to interact with him directly so often, maybe once, I think, because we're just their PR agency. But of course, I was working with their communications and head of communications and PR.
Wow.
So it was a very interesting time also, because I was getting the opportunity to travel on my own, once a quarter to Bombay from Delhi. And because Tata was our client, so we would be put up in nice fancy hotels. So
Hmm.
my what I said earlier about why I still prefer Airbnbs over Taj and ITCs comes from that experience, from that lived experience. So I mean, they're great for business travels, but I mean, for personal travels, I still prefer Airbnbs.
For sure.
And I mean, it was with all the rush and hustle of a first corporate life and all of that. I think uh, it was fun. It also showed me what working in a corporate job setup means. But then I think after 3.5 years, I knew that I don't see myself enjoying it anymore. I wanted something more, something different. I wanted something more trendy and things like that. And that's when LBB also came my way. And for LBB, again, I was there for 3.5 years in total. So I think I have a pattern like that. And I was in the Delhi office for a year almost. And then there was a requirement to set up a team in Bangalore for the brand team, and they only asked me if I would like to move to Bangalore. I happily accepted that offer because my sister also was in Bangalore already.
Okay.
So we moved in together here. And again, I mean, LBB as a job, it, I think, gave me the steepest learning curve of the three jobs that I've had in my corporate life,
Hmm.
because it's a startup. I got to work with the founder directly on several projects. I learned about what branding means, or writing for brands and branded content. So, essentially, content that resonates with people. What social media marketing means, what creative designing means, what's uh, essentially uh, what's trending and what touches the pulse of the people. I think I learned all of that at LB. Again, it was even more fast paced. It was than what I had experienced at Edelman.
Hmm.
Um, it was very creative as a job. Although I think the work environment was such that there were uh, a lot of mixed feelings, I think, between people as colleagues also. So uh, I think, putting all of that into perspective, also it was a fun place. I think
Yeah.
uh, I
Like
think,
any startup for that matter, right? It's
yeah,
always challenging in that sense.
yeah. I think, I mean, the internal team dynamics were mostly fun, but also there were some prejudices and biases that people had about XYZ person and things like that. So I think even then, because I think most of us were still growing up in our mid to late 20s. I think that was also a time that a lot of us were learning a lot of these things about ourselves. So it was very fun like that. But I think it was definitely a very steep learning curve for me, because I got to learn things hands on the job, which I had not been exposed to earlier.
Hmm.
So that happened. And I mean, I also spent, I think, 1.5 years of my COVID time remotely working with LBB. So
Hmm.
I was, I mean, especially during the second wave, I had moved to Dharamshala, and I was living in the mountains because
Wow.
I didn't want to spend another lockdown in a city like Bangalore.
Yeah.
So in between the first and the second COVID, when there was just a little time opening up things and all, I had moved to Dharamshala, which is in Himachal, and then I ended up spending about 5 months there. Lasted through the entire second wave of COVID there, when it was completely empty. And
Wow.
I was living with a friend then, so both of us would sneak around in the mountains, filling a bag with a potato, a tomato, and a kheera, sometimes with the pretext that if anyone catches us and asks us, oh, where we are going, we'll just say, oh, we were just out for a grocery run. So that sort of a thing. Um, and I think living in Dharamshala and working on this job remotely also, I was able to learn why, I mean, why people work remotely when they do that, right? So it also lets you enjoy life very differently. It lets you
Yeah.
have more time to decide what you want for yourself. Because, I mean, in offices, sure, like I have made great friends and I still have great friends from LBB who I'm in touch with. But I think just having that remote job while I was living in the mountains, it opened up the nomadic way of living for me. And that happened, and then whatever, I had some great time at LBB. Then I think I was done after 3.5 years there also. So I then found an opportunity in a very different setup again. So I moved to Tally, which is a legacy brand. It's
Hmm.
the accounting software that most of us know about. Again, homebred and born like in Bangalore. So I took up this marketing job at Tally, and I was told that it was because of my work, my portfolio with LBB, that they selected me because of my writing style and the way I was able to write for the audiences. Uh,
Hmm.
so yeah, and I mean there actually I spent about 3 years, just short of 6 months,
Okay.
and I think I don't think I can speak a lot about it, but sure, I mean, it was a corporate job and
Hmm.
it had its own comforts. And that was a time actually that I was able to have a far better work life balance. And
Hmm.
that's when you saw me start up with Cubbon Reads and Bookmark and my home bakery, and my employers, my managers, all of them, they knew about all of this. There was no way for me to hide it, and I didn't want to also, because I think I also like sharing these things with people who I find a comfort with. And I think I was lucky to have found that with my managers at Tally.
Hmm.
So they were throughout aware of these other projects that I had going on. And they were very proud of it also at that time. And I mean, I have received that feedback. So it was all very nice like that, like very comfortable, very well cushioned job, so to say, which allowed me to start exploring these other projects and pursuits.
Yeah, because I think those projects and pursuits didn't remain projects and pursuits. They became like these global movements. Especially Cubbon Reads, Shruti. I'm so curious about the idea of Cubbon Reads. I know you've spoken about it on other forums at a literature festival and other podcasts, but briefly in terms of what it served for you as an individual. Like, why do you think reading in a park? Because I'm also thinking that post the pandemic, and I felt this when I joined Jew Reads, which was
Hmm.
one of the first chapters here in Bombay. As an adult, I thought there were no third spaces where as adults, you could just go without any commercial sort of interest and engage with other adults that are not in the same job. And Jew Reads was sort of one of the first spaces where I've thought, okay, no one wants to take my money over here, number one. And people are interested in reading together silently. I was like, this is so interesting, so simple. But how did you and Harsh, who I think are the founders of Cubbon Reads, come up with this idea? It's so simple, and I'm thinking, why did other people think about this? But what is the story behind that, Shruti?
I mean, it's exactly what you said.
Yeah.
That we both used to like going to Cubbon Park and sit down and read by ourselves. And I mean, I have done that on several occasions, even before Cubbon Reads started. And I'm sure a lot of people who live in Bangalore have been doing that for ages. I mean, ever since they discovered Cubbon Park, for example.
Hmm.
Uh, and I mean, I mentioned about bicycling. So Harsh also turned out to be a bicyclist. So we both had our bicycles, and we would, in the good Bangalore weather, cycle down to Cubbon Park with a book, and we would sit there by ourselves and read on occasions. And we just realized that it is such a nice place. How about we invite our friends? And that's how it started, actually. So friends came over, we took some photos, as most of us millennials do nowadays, and we just happened to share it on our Instagram, and that's how it picked up. So I mean, friends started responding on Instagram that, hey, I also want to join. So we thought, how about we just start documenting what we're doing through this page called Cubbon Reads. And it literally was just that. We never thought it would become what it has. So uh, because we're not doing anything different. I mean, people have been going to parks, I mean, for ages before I was even born. So to read, sit and read. So that's how it started. But I think it became something into what it became only when we started documenting this consistently week on week, and it became like a pattern, and it's like we gave a new ritual to the city. That's what Cubbon Reads did. It gave people a new meaning, so to say, for them to visit a beloved spot that already exists in the city, right? Cubbon Park is one of the most, I mean, the hottest places to go to when you come to Bangalore, for example.
Hmm.
So we just gave them a new reason, and also a new way to hang out with friends, right? So also a new way to discover friends, maybe. So yeah, so I think that's just how it started. And uh, I think we were just documenting and doing this for our own sake. Like, we just wanted to find more friends who are like minded. And also, I mean, personally speaking, reading in the park on the grass with our books under a tree is also a little nostalgic, because I was talking to you about my childhood days earlier. So we did have a garden at home, and there's a palm tree, for example, a decorative palm tree at home, because otherwise palm trees won't bear fruits in a soil like Allahabad's. So we have that set up, and there are some Ashoka trees and a neem tree and all that also. So I mean, I've done that even as a child, where I've taken a mat, and I mean, we would all do that. My family would go sit in our home garden on the grass on a mat or whatever, with a book, or someone would be peeling the mutter, the peas, like a regular winter activity, or even peanuts. You would buy peanuts from a regular vendor who's on the roads, right? So those fairy wallas. So we would buy peanuts from them, and then peel the peanuts and then roast them and all that. I've had so many, I mean, my parents have had so many uh, bonfire parties in our garden also, under the same trees, in the same garden, on the same grass. So, just spending more time on the grass, uh, I mean, outside of our home space, was something I think that was already ingrained in me. So when
Hmm.
I found a space like Cubbon Park, it came to me very naturally, to lounge on the grass and to feel very grounded and at home of sorts, right? Despite it being a public space.
Yeah.
So it came very naturally to me. There was nothing, there was no thought associated with it
Yeah.
beyond this. It was just about how, I mean, I've grown up and this just feels natural to me.
For
So
sure.
taking a book and lying on the grass and sitting and reading while soaking up the sun and all that. It was just very natural, and there
Yeah.
wasn't much to it actually. It just took off on Instagram and social media, and other people from other cities, they wanted to adapt the concept. And again, this was not something that we pushed on anyone. People only
Okay.
reached out, and they were like, "Oh, this sounds so great! It looks so cool and fun. How can we replicate it in our cities? Why don't you?" In fact, they asked us, "Why don't you guys come and set this up in our city?" And we're like, well, we can't do that because, I mean, we have our jobs and we don't even have the money to keep hopping around from one city to another for doing this with for you. But why don't you set it up? Like, you also have a park. You like this concept. Just go open up your mat, set this page on Instagram, and um, yeah, you will find people who also take interest in this activity.
Yeah, like I think the idea is so simple, and I didn't know that it was community led, like the community requested you to start the other
Yeah.
chapters. I thought that was something the two of you consciously sort of led, because I feel like to replicate such a thing isn't too hard, but it also requires consistency. And I've noticed with Cubbon Reads or Jew Reads that I'm part of here, people turn up every single, weekend, and there is someone or the other documenting that experience. And I feel
Yes.
there's something about that consistency that builds trust and credibility, especially when you're creating that sort of a community. And I, as a member of Jew Reads, which was largely inspired by Cubbon Reads, I found two of my closest friends at Jew Reads. So thank you, Shruti, for creating Cubbon Reads that led to this indirect sort of benefit, in my life. So
Yeah.
I'm really grateful in that sense. But two other projects that I mean, three projects that you started right now. I feel like this time of a gap year or a break in your career is so productive in terms of what you've been able to create, because it's um, Pint of View, your bakery, and Bookmark. So there are like these parallel projects running, and Bookmark is like an actual application. So if you could tell me maybe briefly about these three sort of projects, and how are you balancing time doing all three at the same time? Because they seem like full-time jobs with full-time teams in a lot of ways.
Yeah, I think the priorities keep evolving from time to
Yeah.
time. Uh, but yeah, they're all very close to me, of course. I think essentially what I've come to realize, and I have this on top of my mind because I was sharing this with another friend just 2 days ago, is that I love bringing people together from, like people who are not known to each other, but I love bringing people together in the same
Hmm.
space. Uh, and I don't even know if I can call that building a community actually. It's just about, like for example, I have this friend who lives in Paris and then another friend who lives in Paris. And I just wanted to put the two of them in touch because whatever, like they both were individually sharing with me about how life in Paris is. And I'm like, hey, listen, like I think you will bond really well with that person. And they're both women, and I think I love also bringing women together, like from different parts of the world and all of that. So I think that essentially is something that gives me joy. And for example, like I don't know, but whenever I throw a huge party for some reason in my life, I would love to see friends from different quarters of my life coming together and celebrating together at the same time. Like that's what gives me joy. I think so. All these things that you have also taken names of the projects that you have named, I think somehow let me do that. Like
Hmm.
even when it comes to baking, for example, I have hosted pop-ups for my home bakery at bookstores or at a film screening or things like these. So it helps me also connect to other people who love eating homemade cakes and very fresh, raw style of cakes and not the very well manicured, designed cakes from a professional bakery, for example. And likewise for Bookmark, I mean, it lets me, uh, it allows me to become a cupid of sorts, at times. So whenever someone gets back to me, and there are a lot of people who have written back to us saying that, oh, we met this special someone through Bookmark. thanks to you all.
Absolutely.
So it personally gives me joy that people are finding each other through things that I have built, and that goes for Cubbon Reads also. um I think so, yeah. Essentially, I just find it very exciting when even personally for me, I think I love talking to people. So I love
Hmm.
meeting people. I love listening to them about their own lives. I mean, sure, there's a lot of interesting things happening in the world with regards to politics and science and literature and writing and art and all of that. But I think I also find it very artsy and interesting when I talk to people about how their lives are, and not in a gossipy sort of a way. Maybe sometimes yes, but like personally, I love to know how their lives are and how they look at certain situations, or what they think about certain friendship, and not, I mean, even without taking any names there, I love to just hear their perspective. So I think uh, those are very drawing room style conversations, or I think in our lingo, they can also be a very chai sutta sort of a conversation happening in a balcony space. So I do take very keen interest there. So I think all the ventures that you have taken names of, they all allow me to do that in some capacity.
Hmm, very cool. And I hope, I'm really excited for your next, decade or more. I think I would really hope all of these, reach I know in the long term you'd like to create a soil to, sorry, what was
Yeah.
that? Like
So
a,
I do want to create. I think I'd written soil to table, but I have
yeah.
recently also arrived at the aspect of how it should be mill to table,
Hmm.
because that's where you get your flour from. And I want to make my bakery happen in some capacity. And I mean, Harsh and I, we plan to, whatever we are earning from Point of View, also to use that as a launch pad for my bakery
I,
sometime next year.
I hope that
So yeah,
Sorry, I really hope that comes through, Shruti, and I think that'll
yeah,
be such a amalgamation of everything you've loved and worked on over time, and bringing it all together and working on that project. But the final question I wanted to ask you, Shruti, and I know there's so much more. I'd love to speak to you for hours, but I wanted to respect time. You're also a documentary filmmaker, and
yeah.
you transitioned into that career in the middle of your, I mean, towards like the middle of your corporate career. You took up like this course that you said with DocuStan and did that. But can you tell me about documentary filmmaking, not in terms of what you do, but in
Hmm.
terms of the documentary films that you have loved watching? So for this
Hmm.
last section, you can give me some recommendations of 4 to 5 documentary films that you have absolutely loved and that you think would really be something you'd want a close film buff friend to watch. And through that, maybe you can tell me about your love for documentary filmmaking.
Sure, sure, yeah. So, in fact, I took up the mentorship program not during my corporate life, but after that,
Okay.
because I mean, it started only last year in November. The mentorship program. I had left the job back in June last year, and it went on for about 7, 8 months. So, it concluded in April, May this year. Although, like, we are still very well connected with each other, the mentors, the peers, and all of us. And I, in fact, had made a documentary on Cubbon Reads. This was 2 years ago. That was a very short, 5-minute film on my phone itself. It was made, and it had won a grant from Bangalore International Center.
Uh,
So that, and a very small amount, but it kind of motivated me to maybe look at uh, documenting stories through visual medium. And I was doing some Instagram reels also, right? And they were working well and all. But I think I that's what seeded the my interest in documentary filmmaking. And when I came across this course by this time, I immediately signed up. Like, you have to fill a form, and that's how you get selected through an interview and all that. Um, and it's been again a very fun, very challenging course for me, because uh, it's not easy how you come up with an idea, and they really challenge you. Our mentors luckily, I mean, they're very experienced. So they challenge you to answer why you are picking up a certain idea for your own documentary. Why should you be the one telling this story, right? It could be anyone else. So what makes you different here? What is your stand in this whole
Hmm.
story? What is your perspective? What are you trying to communicate? All of that they would challenge us. One very important learning I think I had in the program was also how when you make a film with a subject versus when you make a film on a subject, it clearly reflects in the documentary film that you put out. As an audience, you're able to perceive that very clearly.
Hmm.
So the humility or with the sympathy, I mean, is that what you're trying to project, or are you
Hmm.
truly invested in this story? Are you truly invested in these people, and are you helping them bring their narrative to the fore through your documentary? Like, those are
Hmm.
two different aspects. Like, so that was my learning, I think, and um, I think in terms of recommendations, some documentary names top of my mind are, I think there's one that I saw quite recently. It's by Shrimoy Singh. It's called And Towards Happy Alleys.
Hmm.
I really was very touched with the rawness of the film because also it was her first documentary. Um, and of course, like she went to Iran and she learned the local language and she was able to talk to a lot of people about literature and poetry and cinema. And also, it showed her politics without explicitly putting out there. And I think I
Hmm.
found that very relatable more than inspiring, I think, in the way that I'm also pursuing my documentary filmmaking journey. Fun fact, Shimoy also visited Cubbon Reads,
That's good.
but I was not in the city back then. And another film that I could say perhaps is um, I'm just thinking. There's another film. Uh, it's called Aina, and it's made by one of my mentors. His name is Siddhant Sareen. He's a documentary filmmaker. It's called Aina, and the film is on acid attack survivors. Uh, but again, not on them. He was actually living with them, and he was. I mean, he's been friends with some of them. I think they're in Noida. So he's been friends with some of them for many years now. So he's been able to document how their lives have been uh, post the trauma, with everything considered, how their lives have been and how their journeys have taken them to so many places and where they are right now. And I mean, they're all people like us only. And in fact, they are perhaps going through something much worse, something more permanent. But even despite all of that, life looks fun for them. And I think it's a very hopeful story
Hmm.
there. I'm just thinking of which other ones. I I would like to recommend a very interesting filmmaker here who has a very different way of telling stories, which is through letters written to her to her dead aunt now.
Hmm.
Uh, Her name is Lipika Singh Darai. She is the only woman filmmaker from Odisha, and she's based in Bhubaneswar. And all her films have been, through letter writing to her aunt who's passed away.
Wow.
She's again, she's a three times national awardee, one of my mentors, one of my closest mentors, like my direct mentor, in fact. Um, I really look up to her, and I think watching any of her films would give you a very different perspective of how storytelling can be done because
Hmm.
she also narrates the whole film in her local language in Odia. And there's a lot of, for example, she's made a film on witch hunting that happens in Odisha.
Hmm.
So uh, I'm unfortunately not able to remember the name, but if you just look up Lipika Singh Darai, it'll show you her entire filmography. Um, so yeah, I think those would be my recommendations. And otherwise, Mubi is a great platform to discover some really interesting documentaries. I think from across the world, from many languages also. Uh, yeah, I think.
Yeah, I think that's such a great list, Shruti. I will be linking all of Shruti's projects and her recommendations in the show notes for anyone interested. And Shruti, one final thing, a book recommendation, because I know you read so much and you meet a lot of readers at, Cubbon Reads and your communities that you create. So something you've read recently that uh, that you really enjoyed, just like fiction, if you'd
Uh,
recommend something off the top of your head.
uh, Fiction only or literary non-fiction works?
Could any of the two, whatever you really enjoyed, but
Okay,
something that.
yeah. Uh, so I mean, this has been my quest in the last, I think, 4 or 5 years. I've been proactively looking at erotic writing by people my age and
Hmm.
fiction, non-fiction either, but essentially like people who live a modern urban lifestyle like ours with jobs, regular jobs, and uh, especially like women from the no men, like I don't take interest in women's in men writing erotica, but women's perspectives. So it's been an active quest of mine because I wanted to read more and more of what's happening in people's lives and how people look at literature and their personal lives and all of that. So I discovered a book called A Handbook for My Lover by Rosalind de Mello,
Hmm.
and I found it very interesting in the way that it's I think inspired from the author's life. It's
Hmm.
not uh, it's not fiction. It's erotic non-fiction,
Hmm.
and I mean, she talks about how she also grew up in the time that she was dating this guy who was a photographer and she was a writer. And I mean, she's moved across some advertising marketing jobs, I think. So it was very interesting for me, in some bits relatable also. And uh, I really enjoyed reading that. It's really, I mean, it's quite a uh, I mean, it can remind some people of some traumas they may have had in life. But I think it's not a difficult read at all. It's a language-wise, it's an interesting read, and I think more such writers should come forth, I think.
Perfect. Thank you, Shruti. This was such a wonderful conversation. I think 1 hour is too less like time to talk about the stories that you and the experiences that you have gone through. I think this is something I'd like to do again, maybe 2 or 3 years down the line, because I feel like you'll be at another space in your life as well. And we'll have so many more recommendations then. But I will be linking Shruti's profile on Instagram where you can reach out to her. And on that note, we come to an end of this episode of Learning Stories. The larger reason I created this podcast was to create a kinder and more empathetic version of the internet where we hold space for each other and where we slowly come to realize that every career takes a certain amount of sacrifice, love, and effort. And we saw that with Shruti's work over time and also her stories from her early childhood and college years. So thank you, Shruti. Thank you so
Thank you,
much.
Abhishek.
And thank you. And stay tuned for more such episodes on Learning Stories.